Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I have a good episode for us today. I'm joined by my man, King Amin of Essex. King Amin, what's going on, man?
Listen, man, everything and nothing at the same time. Last week we had some things, or this weekend past, that happened. And this weekend we got some things coming up. And as far as me, just trying to get in where I can fit in, my good gentleman. So, you know,
Absolutely. So, just want to bring King Amin back to the show. I have a new concept I'm working on here. It's called I Don't Know Shit About Boxing. This is the new show I'm working on. And the point of this is to take more of a humble approach into boxing. I know a lot of the times the boxing scene, everybody has their opinion, and most of the times we're wrong about it. So I want to go with the late great Roger Mayweather and say, hey, most people don't know shit about boxing. And as much as I watch it, most of the time, guess what? I don't know shit about it neither.
you know what's funny about that? It's like all things. If you think you've learned it all, then you're closing yourself off from new information. So the more I think I know, you know what I'm saying? I find myself like Bruce Leroy chasing around a fucking belt buckle, you know? I think the master is in something else, but I actually know more than what I thought I didn't know. So it can work both ways. Sometimes you might think a concept is out of your grasp, but somebody may be making it bigger than what it really is. So this is gonna be fun, man. I like that.
Absolutely. And then just real quick, let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, on YouTube, on Instagram, even on Twitter. It's all King Amin of Essex One. That's where you'll find the championship rounds. It's a segment I got on YouTube. Of course, I've had my good brother Ray on there. Had him on before, need him on again. And on IG is where I do all my blogs and just kind of keep everybody updated on weekend news, notes, and things of that like. So that's where to find me. And of course, check me out here because we be every good fighter needs great sparring. So Ray and I, we've picked up and we're gonna get some sparring in.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it, man. We had some good fights over the weekend. We had the Andy Ruiz versus Luis Ortiz pay-per-view. So I just want to start off recapping that. And something that I do want to say and add on this is I'm looking forward to the numbers. You know what I mean? I'm a numbers guy. I like to see where the pay-per-view lands. And at first, when I saw they were doing this on a Sunday, I go, man, haven't they learned already? This is like the third or fourth pay-per-view that Showtime has done on a Sunday. And typically those numbers aren't very good. But this one was on a holiday weekend, bank holiday, Sunday. Do you think that has anything to do or is going to affect the numbers at all?
It was an interesting weekend as well because you had a lot of wrestling. We talked to you earlier about different hats, and then you had Clash at the Castle, WWE. Which, to bring it up, I'm talking about where people might put their equity. They may have
Mhm.
younger kids in the house that might be invested in WWE. Okay, say you're a fake hipster like me, and you know of the great Kenny Omega, right? You may be tuned into AEW. So Clash at the Castle was on a Saturday. The other wrestling pay-per-view was on a Sunday, right? And we still had boxing on a Saturday. So I mean, I'm just as curious about the numbers because I'm like, why wouldn't you jump out there on Saturday as well? Because it's not like I don't think they were afraid to go and get a Golden Boy card from Hermosillo, Mexico.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you
exactly.
know, uh, it's a very curious decision, and I think the last time, I mean, we've seen Mayweather make the Sunday event, but the last legitimate fight we seen, and I still scratch the side of my head, was Lawrence Coley. We see Lawrence Coley on a Sunday, like in the springtime or something, and I don't know if that was specific because the UK had a holiday, but those numbers are going to be interesting, especially if they project, I guess, an isolated view of what Ruiz brings to the table, his fan base, if you will, versus what's projected to be the fan base of his potential opponent moving forward. So I don't know, man. Those numbers are going to be pretty important.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the recent ones that we saw was Javante Davis versus Esau Cruz was on a Sunday, I believe. And from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, or anybody listening, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe they ever released those numbers. We were still waiting for them to release the real number, and I don't think they did just because they didn't want it to reflect poorly on Gervonta, which,
Sure.
is a little bit of another discussion. But speaking of Isak Cruz, Gervonta Davis, all of that, I want to get into the main card. Starting off, we had a lightweight prospect in Jose Valenzuela versus
Rayo.
Edwin de los Santos. Now, let me ask you this: going into this fight, was Edwin de los Santos on your radar at all?
Not on my radar. And I'm not even going to front and sit here and act. Now, I've heard of him, but not in a discussion of like, yo, be on the lookout for this kid. Now, again, just not being a hipster, but guys like Subraya Matias, you're going to hear me throw that name out early before it's too late. We talked about Hector Garcia, right? So some of these guys were up upon before. I'm not going to act like I knew anything about them, but I did see the press conference, and he said it in the press conference. He said, yo, I'm going to hurt this kid. I'm going to stop him. And then he's going to learn. He's going to be gracious in defeat and go back to the drawing board. He mentioned that. I just would like to think it was exciting for him to cash in on his words, because boy, did he make Rayo look very human. And not to say Rayo was superhuman, but he looked very, unstoppable. He looked like he was picking up momentum. But yeah, I think that was a very significant upset, no matter how anybody wants to frame it. I think it was an upset, and shit, hats off to De Los Santos.
Yeah, I got the box rec pulled up right now. Rayo was one of those guys that was coming up, especially that last performance that he had. Everyone was like, hey, we got to look out for this kid. And then, next thing you know, Edwin de los Santos. And this looked like he had a good record, but it just looked like it was going to be an opponent. But
Sure.
that was gonna fight, not just an opponent looking for a check. And I don't know if Rayo just took the fight in that mindset or not. I don't want to make excuses for the kid. I don't want to go into his mindset. But do you think that was the best version of Rayo, or do you think that Edwin de los Santos is just the real deal?
I think that was the best version of Rios, number one, because what's my man name? Jezreel Corrales. If I said his first name right, I know his last name is Corrales, I believe. He was supposed to fight. So it was another Dominican fighter that was scheduled to fight. Edwin took this fight, from my understanding, on one day's notice, and also from my observation at the very same press conference when Edwin was talking about what he was going to do to Rayo. Rayo was talking about a potential matchup with Pitbull.
Exactly. So
So,
maybe he's looking far too forward, looking past.
but I think even if you think, mentally, if we like to use that term, or just say he was looking past his opponent, I think physically, training wise, there was no excuses. I think Benavidez Sr. prepared him for as good as they could have for any opponent that night. And I just think that, De Los Santos had his number. And, sometimes it's just a fighter's time where he's like, yo, y'all not going to make, I know I'm the opponent, but y'all not going to make me the opponent. And these
Yeah.
guys are more skilled than opportunities might have presented. So again, Dominican fighters have a way of not being able to kind of flourish because of a certain certain restraint of opportunities. Investors, sometimes they get the money and they get a little comfortable. Silk sheets, and not even silk, satin, but you know what I mean. It's many things that happen along the way, but because I don't want people to start taking away from De Los Santos' victory. I don't want
Yeah.
anybody to think that somehow this is a diminished Rayo. That's not what happened.
Hmm. Yeah, you know what I mean? Sometimes people in the sport, most people, whether they know shit about boxing or not, will try to say things like, oh, he got lucky. Well, other people will tell you luck is just when preparation meets opportunity. So if the opportunity presents itself and you're prepared, in the case of Edwin de los Santos, you capitalize.
Yes, because it was luck that forced, got him the opportunity, but it was preparedness that made him ready to receive it. So, you know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yeah, you can have the opportunity all day, but then you could just show up and get beat. And I mean, for what it was a good fight. Now let me ask you, what do you think about the stoppage?
It was fair. Ryo was out on his feet still. And if he wants to, come back, which he can, right? From a loss to a top opponent. Like, and that's the thing. If as long as we can see ourselves, this is very helpful both to Ryo as a professional and also to the sport. So we can stop making these guys invincible. We can start embracing their vulnerabilities and say, okay, one loss for a prospect. He was not even a contender yet. One
Mhm.
loss for a prospect against a veteran or a more experienced fighter does not ruin him.
Yeah, we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater entirely. And I feel like that's really the way boxing needs to adapt and go back to if we're going to continue to move forward in the sport and be able to compete with some of these other programs like, the wrestling that's on, the UFC that's on, because at the end of the day, the casual market are the ones that are investing that equity in. And when you have other things that you could potentially be buying into, you want to buy into the boxing. We want the fans to buy into the boxing in order to move the sport forward. So everyone can't be undefeated. We have to make good fights. And like you said, we have to take away this era of invincibility and be able to move forward with these fights. But speaking of a guy who's suffered a couple losses and been able to come back, especially after 3 years, we had a fight in Abner Mares versus Miguel Flores. Now, let me ask you: in this fight, it was declared a draw at the end of it. What do you think about the decision, and do you think that Abner Mares looked a little bit rusty?
More than a little bit rusty. I didn't like him taking the fight in the first place.
Why is that?
Um, why? Because that eye's been fucked up for a long time. Like that eye's been in bad shape for a long time. And my thing is, you know, um, I'm like Craig father from Friday. You live to fight another day, son. You get
Yeah,
what I'm saying? Like you have so many other things going on. And it's crazy how powerful ego is, how powerful pride is, because that is the only reason for Abner Morris to have been in the ring. Because forget about any unfinished business, and thankfully, respectfully, they put him in there with Miguel Flores. It doesn't have any threatening power. But can you imagine somebody that says, "Never mind the power you think I don't have. You guys got nerve putting me in here with washed ass Abner Morris. What if the opponent had bad intentions?" You know what I'm saying? So I just don't like the setup of it. Now, as
it
far as
could
the
have been a lot worse
decision,
for him.
could have been a lot worse, right? And the
Yeah,
potential. We just see somebody say that catching somebody off guard after the referee's intervention is not a dirty. So boxing is real. So imagine somebody felt like, yeah, I'm about to fucking lose to no Abner Mares with his fucking stiff ass pomade. Like I'm about to lose to that guy, right? And he just
yeah,
like, yeah, I just hit him with a check hook. They broke it up between us. I hit him in a check hook in the eye. He was blinking, and I kept targeting him. That's that's smart boxing, truthfully, right? It's a
absolutely.
fucked up ethically, So
Yeah,
he
but I
didn't.
mean, at the end of the day, it's on the participant to know what they're walking into, and if you can take
Yes.
advantage of it, then absolutely.
So Abner didn't deserve the decision because his fool ass might get back out there and try to do it again.
Yeah, so you think that what would have been best for him is to take a loss, a decision loss where he didn't suffer too much damage, and then say, you know what, maybe I should just stick to be it at the desk.
Not. I'll say. I'll add an addendum to that slightly and say he got the draw to say, as good as you tried and as well preserved as you were and as much as you did to try to protect your only deficit, this is good as it's ever going to be, son.
Yeah.
So get off the fucking line and go have a seat. You know what I'm saying? Like, again, all respectfully under the context of you're not hurting for the money, not that my knowledge, not that it's any of my business. You've had a respectable enough career. What are you trying to get in there against Javante? I heard you say, oh yeah, well, in my prime, I could have outboxed Javante. Like, dude,
No.
ego and pride is a motherfucker, bro. Like, leave that shit.
Yeah, that goes it reminds me of there's this famous clip on YouTube of a old school Joe Rogan podcast clip where he's talking to his good friend Brendan Schaub, where Brennan Schaub was still a top 10 heavyweight in the UFC. And then he asked him straight up, he goes, "What do you think would happen if you fought Cain Velasquez?" And at the time, Cain Velasquez was the champion. He goes, "Oh, I think I think you'd be surprised." And then Joe goes, "No, I think you would be surprised. I think he would fuck you up." And that's one of those things where it goes into the example of these fighters have this, this pride, this ego, and sometimes it distorts the reality a little bit, and they'll end up getting themselves hurt if they go too far into it.
Sure. And I think at this point, it was a good showing. If you just want to go by the scorecards, maybe he did deserve the draw. I could see the draw. I would not have given him decision, not because my feelings about it, but
He didn't
he
do enough
wasn't
to
able
win.
to. Yeah, he didn't do enough to win. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like if this
If
was a
if they
title
gave him a
fight,
win off of that performance, I would be like, come on.
we'd say they gave him a win. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? We'd
exactly.
literally be like they gave you a win. And I'll put it to you like this. His last defeat was against Leo Santa Cruz. Leo, you know what I'm saying, is in better condition despite the damage he's taken. So
hmm
if you put him and Leo in a fight right now, Leo gets it. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, Leo, he takes it again.
if that's the measuring stick, then what are you doing it for? For a rematch with Miguel Flores? Like, come on, man.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, if he decides to come back, they'll probably sell that fight again. It will definitely be an undercard fight, and then if Abner can shake off some of the dust, he'll probably come back and win that fight. Is it most beneficial for him and his health? I guess that's up for him to decide. But speaking of taking damage in a fight, you know where I'm going with this. Isaac
Yeah.
Cruz, the Pitbull, back at it against Eduardo Ramirez. Man, that was a fight. Let me tell you, as soon as the Valenzuela fight ended, I had a buddy of mine that was in the area, and I had him swing by. We were watching. We had one TV with the Florida State game, the other TV with the boxing on, and I told him, I go, bro, you got to watch this kid, Isaac Cruz. You have to watch this kid. And don't blink either. And this was one of those fights where it was a don't blink moment. What do you think about this fight?
Well, you know, guys that win even after a loss, Isaac Cruz is one of them because he had the courage to fight one of the best. So when I saw him in this fight, I said to myself, this is either the unmasking or this is the confirmation. The reason why I said unmasking or confirmation is because I said we have to see if the pressure is what it is. Now we've seen him. I don't want to say lesser opponents, but Eduardo Ramirez is a good enough opponent on his level as a contemporary. Even if we think Cruz jumped the line when he got tanked, okay, boom. Ramirez is a suitable and credible enough opponent, and they didn't even look like they belonged in the same ring.
Yeah.
Cruz's pressure, yes, he was vulnerable to certain punches, but I kind of think he just allowed himself to just, you know what I mean? Like all fighters, you in a fight, you're gonna be vulnerable. So whatever Ramirez was hitting him or trying to hit him with, uh, Cruz was in total control mentally and just, just pressure wise, IQ wise. He had a plan and he fought like he was going, on a straight seek and destroy mission without being reckless. And that was key to me. He was seek and destroy without being reckless. Even when you saw him just now, he's pumping the jab. When you know a guy is coming there to seek and destroy and he's still pumping the jab, that's boxing IQ. So that's the kind of shit I saw.
Most
Beautiful.
definitely. Yeah. Pushing him against the ropes and then unloading. Right here, he's got him hurt. So he's swinging a little more wildly because you can get away with that. But boom, boom, boom. That
And
right
look
there,
how
the
he
way
went to
he,
he went to the body a little bit before he brought him a top. Even though they were wild hooks, I'm gonna just touch you to the body just to see if you move your hands. Just
yeah.
touches. You know what I'm saying?
Boom. And then the finishing sequence, man, the way he faked the uppercut, he faked the right hand. So he double faked him on two different variations of the right hand, and then came across with the hook right hand. Man, like for him to just not be swinging wildly in there, he's a problem, and that was one of those situations like I bring up, lucky in the sense that some people say, oh, well, he had such a close fight with Gervonta. He was lucky to have that. Well, he was prepared to be able to fight Gervonta, and he had the opportunity to fight him when the Rolly situation went down. Now, does that fight ever see a rematch? I doubt it. But I think Isaac Cruz, with this performance, let everyone in the boxing scene know, listen, if we're going to be comparing lightweights at this point, if you're putting people in the mix like Ryan Garcia, then you need to be putting Isaac Cruz in that mix as well. What do you think?
Destiny's Child. Say his name. Say his name. Yes, he fought his way into discussion again. Even the loss after Javon, because then the question becomes, okay, so you know, speculation is looming. Ryan and Tank may be worked out for December, early January. Cool. Where does that leave Cruz? Okay, Raya was talking about a match with Cruz. I bet you he doesn't want that now. You do have some of the other guys at 135. Now, Devin, we know he's occupied. Cruz wouldn't need a fight against a Cambosis. But again, if there's anybody else at 35 that feels as though they have a legitimate stake or claim, right? And plus he just won this was a mandatory. This is for like a continental title or something.
Yeah, I think this was some sort of WBC eliminator fight.
Yeah. So again, like no matter which way you cut it, whoever think they're next, at 135, it's really because I don't see him. I don't see them doing business with a Loma. Loma's waiting for either the cash out fight or a title fight with the winner of Haney Cambosis.
Most
Um,
likely that's the way it's looking.
and,
Especially
and
with
really,
Bob controlling the Infinity Stones over on that side of the street. It's one of those situations where now we're kind of looking at the same situation before the Canelo loss, which even still now is, how everyone from PBC, you had all these fighters in play talking about, oh, we want Canelo, just because he did business with them to get the IBF. But at this point, those titles are elsewhere. You guys
now
need to
let me ask.
consolidate your fighters over here. So while Haney has all of the titles over there, and he has to rematch Kambosos, they're going to push for a Lomachenko fight. Let's start making these fights over here that we can make and start consolidating things so that when it comes time to do business, we're seeing the best fight the best.
Because PBC is so thin at 135, you know what I'm saying? Now, what they could do is if they have, what's this guy's name? If they have Tank and Ryan locked in, right? They could go with Michelle Rivera, the Ali impersonator kid. He
Yeah,
looks
yeah,
more like
yeah.
Will Smith pretending to be Ali than he looks like Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, he does.
nonetheless, if that guy is available, maybe. And I was thinking because I know Mario Barrios has moved up to 140 by now. But if Barrios was at 135, just because he's a
Barrios is
common
at
opponent with,
147 now.
he's so yeah, after the whole Thurman debacle. So I guess Isaac Cruz, he's fought his way into discussion. This fight allows him either, I don't want to say a soft touch, but it allows him a different opponent while he's waiting for the rest of the division to be sorted out. So chances are, if Tank and Ryan is happening, he's going to get the Rivera kid, and then that'll put him right for the winner of either a rematch with Tank or he'll, have to go to the other side of the street. But that's the way I see that one working out.
Do you think that Isaac Cruz could potentially get a matchup against Edwin de los Santos, or is that way too soon for Edwin de los Santos?
I think that's too soon for De Los Santos, but remember we talked about opportunity.
Hmm.
He might not think it's too soon because he's saying, hey, y'all was going to throw me away and here I am. So whatever you think you got from me, and I have more than the day or the limited time to prepare, I'll be ready for it. Chances are he may take that fight. And again, I now the question is, does Pitbull Cruz take that fight? Does he want to run the risk of losing? And this is where the semantics, is it ducking? Is it avoidance? Is it postponing? Is it a step aside? All these
Is it
fancy
good
semantics.
business? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Is it good business? Is it matchmaking? Does it
Yeah.
make sense though for him to fight De Los Santos? If this was MMA, we'd say, well, yeah, because to see who's better. But in boxing, it's kind of like, hey, De Los Santos, and I'm just giving you boxing. De Los Santos, yeah, he just got here. Maybe he hasn't done enough. Give him Rolly, right? Give
That
Dos
could be a good
Santos
comeback
Rolly.
fight for Rolly. Absolutely. Because if we're looking at the landscape of the 135 at PBC, you got Gervonta at the top of it with his Chuck E. Cheese belt or whatever they called it. And then we got Rolly, we got Isa Cruz. Now we have Edwin de los Santos. We got Will Smith, Muhammad Ali. We have a couple players in there, but we just have to see them play against each other. Meanwhile, while the real titles are elsewhere, so that when it comes time, either 2023, chances are at this point, 2024, we actually see, one face, one name.
Yeah, man, and it's gonna be hard getting them Infinity Stones together, man. But hopefully, the politics force people to work together, and the business of it makes enough sense that there's not all these semantics and subterfuge and shit. We don't got to break out the sources and dictionaries for all the bullshit terms they come up with for the reasons why we're not getting the fights we want.
That's what I'm saying. And then when it comes down to when I say most people don't know shit about boxing, and I don't know shit about boxing is a lot of the times people will say, "Oh, this fight needs to happen, this fight needs to happen," but they don't know the X, Y, and Z that goes into it. But really, a lot of the times there shouldn't be. You know what I mean? There should be able to be good fights without titles. And that's exactly what we saw in our main event. So moving on to our main event, we saw Andy Ruiz versus Luis Ortiz for a WBC title eliminator fight. Man, that fight, this was one of those fights that I thought should happen a long time ago, and it almost didn't happen. I think one of them was set to face Tyrone Spong and whatnot, but then the other party, put in like an appeal and whatnot. I forget exactly what happened there, but ultimately we got this fight. What did you think about this fight?
I gotta take a deep breath. Now, you know, Luis Ortiz, man, this has got to be it for him. This got to be it. I mean, I don't want to be dismissive of him because yes, he only has 3 losses, but if you lose to Andy Ruiz, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but if you lose to Andy Ruiz in the way that he did, yes, the power is still, but it's just the power. I mean, he's getting deaded off clip shots. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't go down that many times. You have to question your durability or your, focus, or it's just the age. It's got to be the age factor. Now, with Andy, fast hands Andy, the problem is without those knockdowns, it would have been a draw.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, without those knockdowns, would those rounds have even gone to him?
No. And the
Yeah,
likelihood is
so he
no.
would have lost, most likely.
And look, but look at it the other way. My issue with Ortiz is he wouldn't have beat Charles Martin if he didn't stop him.
Yeah, exactly. That fight wasn't going his way either.
So Ortiz is like win big or lose big. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know what the expectation is against the next opponent. The only person I could see a fight that makes sense for the both of them before we get to Andy, I gotta see Dillian White and Luis Ortiz.
I
I'd
think
love to
that's a
see
good
that fight.
fight. That's a good fight because Dillian White's one of these guys that wants to. I don't want to speak for anybody and whatnot, but I feel like maybe his fans have been very entitled when it comes to Dillian White, saying, "Oh, he deserves this, he deserves that. He was waiting for so long." To me, I was like, "Man, he got knocked out cold." That to me that puts you kind of in the back of the line off of
True.
one fight. Then they come back saying, "Oh, well, he made it up," and sometimes it works. But for me, I think was it he popped for steroids and everything. So, but so did Luis Ortiz. So let both of them get in there, no drug testing, and get that fight on. But I feel like Luis Ortiz he's a victim to his own patience. He's very patient in there, looking for the shots, trying to box well, which is a very difficult person to box with, especially when you're sparring. Um, but when you're trying to rack up rounds, and these are close rounds, you can't let somebody just, throw a flurry against you and steal that round. You have to go out there and do it, which he did. Unfortunately, like in the 12th round, was a little too late for him.
Well, Luis Ortiz, he was, one of Joe Lewis's sparring partners, so time is not on his side. All right. Um, Talk about patience. I mean, Yeah, patience is one thing, but when you timing, his timing is off, and that's what I was looking for earlier. He's being timed, and his timing is off, so he no longer has that capability. And look at that, from 2 losses to Wilder, he suffered that much deterioration. Can see, right? You get what I'm saying? Um, it's
Well,
like,
the gentleman on your program said it best with the other day. He said, Father Time. He said this is a young
yeah,
man's sport, and that's who I'm going for. At the end of the day, you asked him. You said, "Who do you think has this fight?" He goes, "Man, I like King Kong, but this is a young man's game." And I think that's what we saw. Especially, I want to say it was the first knockdown where Andy Ruiz was able
sure.
to counter Luis Ortiz counter with the right hand, and that's what dropped him. I want to say I might be wrong on that.
No, no, that's exactly it. And so, looking at you talking about fast hands, Andy that can counter a counter, but we question certain elements. Now again, I'm not going with the the body shaming thing, but I just want to think about his activity. That activity has to increase, and so I know Wilder, is the fans want to see. Cool, let's get the Wilder Ruiz fight. I'm just saying, though, if somehow, things go in another direction, I would like to see him, because Andy's got too much patience too. And I think waiting for Wilder to land on you, you're gonna get landed on. I
Yeah.
think Andy would do better in terms of being pushed to have to be the best Andy against a guy like Chisora.
Oh yeah,
Um,
a fight with Chisora would be a huge fight. Here's that first knockdown that I have brought up. It looks like
yeah.
he went boom
Uh-uh.
with the left, countered him on the right. And but I mean, like you said, Andy was very patient as well because once he felt that power in that second round of Luis coming back on him, that's when that fight had very, if you looked at it on a line graph, it would be very dull, dull, a lot of action. Dull, dull, a lot of action. It was in spurts, that fight, which ultimately it made it a good fight, but there was a lot of downtime in that fight as well. And when you're fighting a guy like Wilder, all it takes is one.
Yeah, so all that waiting around is like that's not going to work for him. Whereas Chisora stays active and he's got some power, and you can expect him to gas, but it's almost like he's not going to gas out. He's just not going to be as relentless, and then he'll burst on you. So I
Mhm.
think for a guy like Andy that can have that lapse or just kind of that wait, nah, you need somebody staying active. Now you know, Dillian White is another good fight for him as well. But if you want to put 2 guys at heavyweight coming off of a win, I like the Chisora fight. Of course, people will love the Wilder fight, but like I said, I don't think the Wilder fight is as competitive because I don't see Andy having the power to keep Deontay Wilder off of him, unless somehow Wilder has experienced the same deficits that he imposed on Ortiz. Could this be again? And he's still got to get through Hellenius, who's not going to be afraid to throw a little bit of power himself. But could we see a fighter just a little bit gun shy because they've been shot before? We won't know. But what do you think? Which direction do you think is better for Andy? You think he needs to go Wilder, or could he do Chisora?
You know what? I think definitely he needs to go Wilder, but what I will say, I don't want to say he needs to go Wilder. I would say he needs to go the winner of Wilder versus Hellenius because this is a fight where how many times have we seen in boxing and MMA and all of these fights where we talk about, oh, this guy, this guy, this guy, while they have a fight lined up. And that's exactly how Andy Ruiz won his fight, won his titles, was everyone was talking about everyone except for him, and he went in and pulled off the upset. Deontay Wilder has a huge task in front of him. Hellenius. People want to write off Hellenius, but Hellenius is coming off of 2 huge wins against a very big prospect in what was his name? Babyface. What was his nickname?
Oh yeah, Adam Kawanaki.
Yeah, Big Baby, or whatever his nickname was.
Yeah, Adam
Two
Kawanaki, babyface assassin.
Babyface Assassin. Yeah, against Babyface Assassin. Two, and then you talk about somebody who wasn't the same after those knockouts, and now you saw his last fight, he was not the same. So Hellenius is the real deal. Maybe in his previous losses, he didn't show it, but I think he's developed as a fighter. And this is a very dangerous fight for Deontay Wilder because they are sparring partners or had been sparring partners. I was his main sparring partner for
There you go.
the Tyson Fury fight. So on what side does it benefit? Does it benefit Hellenius because now he knows exactly what Wilder's going to do? He's at least tasted at least a hint of that power before, and now he can set up an appropriate game plan to outbox Wilder. Or does the adverse happen in Wilder now knows Hellenius very well. He knows that he can land that shot, and that's why his team picked him.
I think Wilder would be naive to think that he's got this one in the bag. Although you need a healthy sense of confidence, in approaching all things. I think Hellenius, though, is super confident to have taken the fight in either one of two things or both. They paid him very good, such that this will be the one that will secure his future, right?
Mm-hmm.
Win, lose, or draw. Or two, not only could this be the fight that secures his future because it will, be worth the compensation, perhaps that familiarity and saying to himself, I came into camp and remember how sparring works. We ain't really going 100%. They asked me to limit myself, or they asked me to give you certain opportunities to help you. You ain't even actually seen all of what I can do. And I
Yeah, you're
wasn't
going
necessarily trying to show you
60%,
either.
70%. You're not going 100% trying to knock out the other guy, especially when you
No.
know the guy has a whole camp. You don't want to be the guy that it messes up the opportunity for him, especially when you're getting paid. There's real questions there for sure.
Absolutely. So suppose this guy Hellenius has been saying to himself, like, yo, they paying me to give him confidence. They're not paying me to really box against him like somebody with boxing would do that wouldn't allow him to stand there and hit me. Y'all want me to come in as his partner and to give him confidence because I have to allow him to punch me versus me coming in here and boxing like myself and knowing that he don't even jab and I can kind of whiff away from them bombs because homeboy ain't trying to set it up, as consistently as one might not require. That would build confidence. But in the same way, Wilder probably said, "Yo, I don't give a shit what you think of me. If I hit you with one of these, it's only Sam that has seen the White Walkers and survived. A la Game of Thrones. It's one man."
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? That's why I wanted to bring this fight up because we were talking about Andy versus Wilder, but I would be someone who doesn't know shit about boxing if I just sit back and go, "Oh yeah, Wilder's got this in the bag." Especially heavyweight boxing. Look at the past. Heavyweight boxing is the most unpredictable that it can be, especially with a dangerous guy like Hellenius.
Yeah, and I can't wait for this fight because, like you pointed out, there can be fights with no titles on the line, significant implications. The heavyweight division
Absolutely.
is probably the leading division to where no belts on the line, who's fighting, and there's a domino effect. So as we wait to see if the Usyk's in the Fury fight gets made, or if AJ's in play, perhaps AJ and Wilder. We've heard that fight speculated about. And
Hmm.
then when you need, another heavyweight opponent, Dillian White is always going to be there. Chisora's coming off a win. We still got Parker and Joyce that needs to be settled, right?
Yeah,
So any of these fights, and any of these guys, as far as Ortiz, even right. Suppose the winner of Parker and Joyce wants Ortiz or gets Ortiz in some weird way. Um, yeah, man. Wilder just, to bring us back to Wilder Hellenius, I hope that Wilder is willing to go some rounds and kind of build on what he came off the fifth round against Fury. That's when he boxed and put Fury down twice. If he starts this fight with Hellenius beginning at the fifth round of that fight, I'd be very impressed at his ability to evolve.
absolutely. And when we talk about heavyweight fights with big implications, I think that one of the best things about the heavyweight division right now is that in boxing, what helps the sport is when we can trust that the fights that should be made are going to be made. So especially with these fights coming up, we knew, okay, if they win their fights, we know that Wilder and Ruiz are going to fight. And then eventually that'll set up to a Wilder versus AJ fight, especially now. For a little while, they were trying to go off of the boxing model of, okay, marinate it a little bit. But we've seen that be upset all too often in the past couple years in the heavyweight division. So I feel like now in the heavyweight division, it's hey, we need to make these fights happen no matter who's on what side of the street. We need to make these go down right now. And when it comes to big fights happening, we're rumored for a big fight happening in Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury. Do you think this fight's going to happen? I mean, we've seen Tyson Fury come say, "Oh, I'm retired. I'm not going to fight ever again. Oh, I'm going to fight Chisora for a third time." And then out of the blue just says, "You know what? I want to fight before the end of the year. I'm calling out Usyk." Usyk said he's not ready. So he goes, "How about this? I'll make a huge deal for Anthony Joshua." And then he comes out with the terms today or yesterday. Comes out with the terms, says, "I'm going to offer you 60-40. What do you think? Do you think this fight's going to happen? What do you think about the terms? Do you think that's fair? And are you confident that the fight will happen?
I can't say that it'll happen with any degree of confidence because, it's boxing and what is
Yeah,
supposed to happen doesn't happen. We're still waiting on Spence and Crawford. So, you know,
exactly. Yeah, I
um,
saw I saw a rumor today though saying that sources say that it is being finalized for November, December, but I'm not holding my breath on that one yet, just yet,
brother, I'm too brown to turn blue if I hold my breath. That shit ain't happening.
man. And you wouldn't try either because you know the game of boxing.
And so I know this game as well. Tyson Fury just showed up in what did I just talk about? WWE Clash of the
Yeah,
Castles. He was there and was a part of the show, if you will. He delivered a punch to win Austin Theory and intervened in the match. Now, what does that mean? This guy knows marketing. He knows business. So him putting the terms out there, I would say it's got to be relatively serious that he's willing to put terms out there that either he or Frank Warren can be held accountable for and two, but it is putting out in the media. So it is the same spectacle associated with wrestling. Tyson Fury is a personality. He does have character, and I think he's just laying the foundation for another option and maybe trying to put the squeeze on Usyk in them and saying like, "Yo, I could go in another direction if y'all ain't with it." But also too, it's got to be a smart play because if AJ decides, which I don't know, he could or he couldn't. If AJ decides to say no, I'm waiting to see what happens to this Wilder thing because I believe that fight is more important to my legacy as contemporaries. We were kind of neck and neck when you were off on your bender, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. I'm just saying when you was off on your bender, and they were saying he's only good if he come back. I remember a thing being, is it AJ or is it Wilder? And who knows? Maybe that could be a little bit more appealing. So Tyson Fury is gypsy magic and he's trying to market himself, which, that's gonna get him paid.
yeah, absolutely. So on one end, it might just be this clout chasing, marketing style. But I mean, I've been seeing, if we're looking for reasons to have confidence in this fight, I've seen Frank Warren say, "Hey, we're going to make a very fair offer." Then later, Tyson Fury came out with the actual term saying 60-40. I saw Eddie Hearn. They asked him about it. He said, "Listen, if they come out with a good offer, we'll 100% entertain the offer." And at the moment, for Anthony Joshua, the real other option you have is to take either a tune-up or a fight with somebody, like we discussed on the last show, like Hergovich or Dylan Dubois, something like that. But at this point, I guess the question is, does if you take this fight against Tyson Fury on very fair terms, I believe, considering that you're coming off of two losses and have no title, if you lose to Tyson Fury, does that affect your legacy even more? Or does that
Yes,
still kind of put you in the same position
yes, makes him greater,
if he
makes him even
loses
greater, makes him
because he
even
took the
greater
fight?
because he took the fight. Although in another direction, And this is when, again, you can lose, but you can win. If AJ says, nah, you know what? Forget about Fury. He's a whole bunch of noise, and I respect what he did. I really want this American guy that's really been, we've had a thing. AJ really can't lose. The only way he loses is from packing it up by not fighting either Fury or Wilder. I think any of these interim fights with a Hergovic, last time we checked the landscape, maybe those fights meant something, but now they don't mean shit. Save Hergovic for a Dubois or give him to somebody else. Nah, man. Or give Zhang a Dubois, or something like that. Or give
Let those
Zhang and Hergovic.
contenders let them
Yeah,
fight it out. Let
man.
them consolidate, their contendership status while Anthony Joshua actually still if he like you said, if he takes this fight, he's still continuing to at least attempt to be great. And that I agree with that. That does
Because
go ahead.
because he's saying, hey, if it's going to be my last ditch, I'm going to put myself in a position to have to give it my all. And if I can't beat this man, then he can retire. So can you imagine if he's got the fight with Fury in the UK? The money's so big they got to do it, overseas, because I don't know if they can accommodate it. But suppose Wembley opens up and they can do it there, win or lose. Now remember, Tyson Fury, is outrageous as he is, he's a showman. He's classy as all hell. He's gonna go across the ring. Yeah, I've called you a big shithouse doser, but I respect you because you're a fighting man. He's gonna shake hands. They're gonna fucking raise hands. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It don't get no better than that.
As long as
Pageantry.
Joshua doesn't take the mic and start going off on some unhinged rant.
You know what though? Even if he did, he would just have to retire. He could have another moment, but he just have to retire and say, "Yo, I've given my heart." Call me, John. AJ, I got something for you. You know what I'm saying? I got public relations
So,
for you, champ.
you know what? You know what,
Uh,
King? I mean, this is where I disagree with you because I don't think he has to retire because I think win or lose, especially win, but if you lose to Tyson Fury, the Wilder fight is still there. We knew that, especially after he lost to Usyk, chances of him beating Fury are pretty slim. It kind of already answered that question too. Like, okay, we saw him lose twice to Usyk, even though they're not the same guy. If you took a bunch of actual boxing fans and said, "Hey, who's going to win this fight, Joshua or Fury?" Everyone, yeah, Fury's going to take this fight. We know Fury's going to take this fight. So this might be one of those situations where it's not completely the same, but you might get like a McGregor effect in the sense that you're losing fights, but you're still a big draw. And the fact that you're taking big fights lets people know, because if he sits around and waits for Wilder, Wilder has to get through Hellenius. He's got to get through Andy Ruiz. We're talking about
sure.
2 fights now. You know what I mean? That puts that date,
Well,
that puts a big fight that you're waiting for with 2 contingencies all the way at the end of next year. Tyson Fury's talking about big money right now, November, December.
now on that note, my only issue is he loses to Fury. Then it's kind of like, I've seen this movie before. He can't convince you or me. Now this is when, this is when you say you don't know shit about boxing, but you just pull the boxing move. Because if he loses to Fury, he can't convince me or you, hey man, I'm gonna give one more try with the other motherfucker with all that power in his hand. Like, if he can't beat the boxer, he can't beat the boxing bear, he's gonna beat the fucking sledgehammer? Nobody can convince us he would do that. So if he loses to Fury, he's got to get the coronation. Him and Queen Elizabeth and Charles and whomever the fuck, they got to invite Meghan and Archie for that shit back. You know what I'm saying? He can't convince us again that he's marketable enough unless it's a passing of the guard at that point. He could not put himself in. He lost to Usyk. Hypothetically, he loses to Usyk twice, loses to Fury. We don't even want to see him fight Wilder. We wouldn't even want to see him fight Ruiz because we'd say, yo, the man ain't there.
I disagree. I think that fighting Tyson Fury, because everyone's beat Tyson Fury, so we're not writing off Wilder because he lost to Tyson Fury. You
Absolutely
know,
not.
I think the fans will forgive AJ for taking the fight and losing, especially it depends on the manner of which he loses. If he loses a decision, it's like, all right, whatever. But then he can fight another one of these interim fights like a Hergovich or somebody or a Dubois, at least get one win because now you're coming off of 3 losses. Allow Wilder, let's say it plays out on the PBC side where Wilder wins against Hellenius, Wilder wins against Ruiz. At this point, AJ's fans and the English fans, for years we talked about Wilder versus AJ. People are going to want to say AJ's going to be at this low. Wilder will be back up on a high, especially if he comes off a win against Ruiz. People are going to say, you know what? We want to see if AJ can redeem his legacy and at least say, I beat that man Wilder. I beat the American. At least he beat the American.
You know, he owes you a commission because that's some Jordan Peele levels of nope. Because it works. It does work. It actually works boxing business wise. It works. It makes
It'll
sense.
sell.
It'll sell. But now I'm turning into you. This is what I'm saying. But we know the competitive nature of it would say again. Wilder's riding off of the presumably, right? He's coming off the Hellenius win, potentially the Ruiz. Now, if he loses to Ruiz and AJ's lost to Fury, we got a match. But Wilder coming off of 2 wins, I think the UK constituency will say, nah, we don't even want to see our guy with the potential of being lost. He lost to one of us. We don't want him to lose to a Yank.
To the American.
You know what I mean?
But at that point, it's all on the line. At that point, everything's on the line. Your whole legacy's on the line. You lost to everybody else. You lost to the Ukrainian. You lost to Ruiz once. At least you kind of got that back with your Saudi Arabia showdown against the Fat Boy. But you fought the Michelin Man in a 12-point decision. But and the thing is too, in an oversized ring, which you utilized effectively, right?
Every millimeter.
Yeah. So and then still got rocked a little bit in that fight too. But I think if Ruiz beats Wilder, I think you have the trilogy fight still. I think that Anthony Joshua has options and that this fight against Tyson Fury not only is a huge payday, an opportunity of legacy, but if he loses, I don't really feel like it's that huge of a loss. Your invincible aura, I should say, has already been shed. You have 3 losses on your records. What's one more against the best fighter in the world? Who cares?
Okay. I'm going to tell you something a wise man always told me. So you thinking like you. You ain't thinking like him. And we just talked about that meltdown concept now. And I would love for him to have it. But we then have to question, does AJ have the resiliency to brush it off and say, nah, I can come back? Or does he have that sort of, outburst? And then nobody can convince him because he can't convince himself. And that's what I think makes him a little bit too much of a wild card, because we'd have to see him coming off a better circumstance. I don't know that he has it in him to take another look. Like in this way, he's almost been as graceful as he could, and only a win over his fellow countrymen could maybe give him the comforting grace in defeat. I think, the kind of defeat to, you know what I'm saying, Wilder at this point, he may, and come to think of it, you may be right. He may be gracious enough because he's like, yo, this is my contemporary, this was my peer. They said who would win, and the better man won. But I don't know, man. I'd be mindful. I'd have you know what I'm saying? That's
I see where you're going with it. Well, I'm speaking. We're speaking in theory right now, but theory is easy when you just lay it out, but there's extra variables that come in, like a fighter's ego, like their pride, which we saw on display. So I'm with you on that. But at the end of the day, a lot of things have to play out. But I feel like really when we're looking at, the next step forward, Anthony Joshua already had said, oh, I'm looking for another turnaround in November.
Yeah.
And then this is the absolute biggest fight that you can make, even in the heavyweight division, possibly. It might even sell more than versus Usyk. And you're getting another title opportunity for a title that you never fought for, which you said you wanted, and favorable terms. You might as well deliver everything, hand deliver it on a plate. If Anthony Joshua turns this down, this is a huge L for his legacy, I believe.
Yeah, no, I'm with that. That is an absolute fact, right? He's got to take this. If it's available, he's got to take it. No questions asked. Take it.
Absolutely. Well, we talk about fights that sell. We talk about pay-per-view numbers and whatnot. And there's been a little bit of a new star shaking up boxing and whatnot. And this guy right here, let me go ahead and put this on the screen. It looks like we have official news.
Mm.
Jake Paul is going to be fighting Anderson Silva this Halloween, October 29th. What do you think about this fight? I heard you and your co-host talking about this on your show. He said it's a young man's game. It is, but what's your first thoughts with
My
this
first
announcement?
my first thought is legitimacy. Even though, and it's a couple points I had made, on my show, like you said, it's the fact that Anderson Silva has been preparing for a showdown with Roy Jones for the better part of, like way back in the day.
I mean, we're
Like that.
talking about 10, 15 years, maybe more at this point. I would say at least 15 years.
And
There have been rumors circulating about that fight.
and just think of the concept that and we all can get this, whether we started off with karate or taekwondo or something, or even wrestling, and we picked up MMA. We picked up, excuse me, something standard. We picked up Muay Thai. We picked up some Taekwondo. Any fighter or any connoisseur is going to have more than one. Like if you're really a practitioner or seek to make yourself a practitioner. So what I mean is, not just having a boxing coach. I'm pretty sure either prior to, because of, and especially now, Anderson Silva, he has the experience hands down. Now, um, a 1987 Buick Regal Grand Country, my favorite car. Yeah, you put a 454 block in it and everything. It's going to be a beast, but it's still an 87 Buick. I don't know if it can hold up against this supercharged V8. You know what I'm saying? A Corvette with all this carbon filter stuff on it.
Yeah, I think
I
what it
just don't
comes
know.
down to, the argument that would be made is Jake Paul the Corvette? You know what I mean? A lot of people are saying, whether they don't know shit about boxing or whether I don't know shit about boxing, people say, when is this guy going to fight a real boxer? When is he going to fight a real boxer? And the question is Anderson Silva a real boxer?
Yes, and let me jump in here with this. Jake Paul is a Corvette because for years, Corvettes were disrespected and not considered luxury cars because they're American. You had to have a foreign. Well, Corvettes have caught up to Ferraris and Lambos and things like that. So if you give things enough time and you appreciate and it appreciates, then it has its increased equity and value. And so Jake Paul's time investment within boxing, he's been invested for so long, you can't say he ain't serious about it. As a matter of fact, if you're paying attention, every true old school fighter or older fighter that call him out, he bring him into camp. He done brought in Chad Dawson, brought in Steve Cunningham. I think he even brought in Tarver at one point. So he's a real student of the game.
He's
And
been
I
sparring
think,
John Pascal.
come on. So, and then they'll say, well, that's sparring. It's not fighting. Well, he's warming up to it. So back to Anderson Silva. Yeah, man. The experience, all the nuances of being a fighter is there. I believe he has still, the technique, advantage, even though he might be a little bit unorthodox coming from the MMA. But I think, to throw age out the window, I think it's, and I use the example of Popeye Rivera versus Badu Jack. You got this young fighter bouncing off but he gassed, and the old dude seemed to do some subtle things, body work that gave him the advantage over time. I feel like, and I want, and I hope, I'm being real, Anderson Silva can pull this one out because I regard his win over Chavez Jr. higher than anything that Jake Paul has done. And so there's one of these guys that could be considered a spectacle. Both of them can, but one of them has actually beat a real boxer. And that's why I'm going with Silva.
Absolutely. You know what I mean? I couldn't agree more. Listen, when they were talking about potential opponents for Jake Paul, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was a name that was thrown around. And for all the people that are saying, oh, this guy still isn't fighting a real boxer, he's fighting another MMA guy. what does that make Anderson Silva? Does he when can he shed the MMA guy title? Is it when he goes in there and outboxes a former world champion? Because that's what he did, and he was able to squeeze a decision in his hometown on his father's card. So that's how he really did beat him. And yeah, he's a little unorthodox, but with the way he was moving inside, fighting him against the ropes, getting those inside uppercuts in on him, like he was moving around like a real boxer that had a little couple extra steps to him. And I mean, you can see the highlights on the screen. You know what I mean?
You
We watched this fight. I was sitting there shocked, like, oh my God, he's outboxing a former world champion boxer.
and check this comparison. This is Jamaica, Florida by way of Jamaica for you. He reminds me a lot of Glenn Johnson, Glenn Road Warrior Johnson. I don't know if you know about Glenn Johnson and his gyms down there, but he's an older guy. And Glenn Johnson was the one that defeated Roy Jones.
Yeah, knocked him out.
Exactly. So he had always, the Road Warrior, this unorthodox style, always. And when I look at Silva, I look at all that unorthodox nature. Yeah, he's a little flat-footed, but so is Jake. Right? And
Mhm.
I know what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to tell him to go to the body, just hurt him and walk him down and make him run from you. Make him run for you, and then them later rounds, keep trying to drown the basement so you can hurt him up top. But I think Silva is going to be able to cut the ring off and close the distance because there's a fearlessness that he has from going in there with them 4-ounce gloves and
And you
and
see
and,
it
and
right
being in
here on
there.
the screen.
Yeah,
The
man.
way he's look at that, landing double left hands. He's even using a little half tie clinch in order to land a couple extra shots, what aren't necessarily legal in boxing, but if you can get away with it, so it's just one of those things. I feel like everybody just wants to hate on Jake and not give him his due credit, but you see what for him to this be his sixth fight and then even his fourth fight, other quote real boxers aren't fighting 8-round fights even in their
Yeah,
fourth fight. They're fighting 4 rounders, and they're fighting guys who most of the time are quote cab drivers or quote, some of these are bums. Like some of these guys legitimately are, you know, dudes that are coming in there to get a check. You even see Jake made a comparison about Gervonta Davis and said, in your eighth fight, you fought a debutant who was a 4-1 MMA fighter. I've
yeah.
even seen at local shows plenty of times where, it's a local show. Some of the earlier boxers are coming up. And then I ask, hey, what's good with this opponent? Oh, yeah, that guy's an MMA fighter. He's coming in. These guys are coming in to get extra work. So
Yeah.
for Jake's fourth fight to not credit him fighting a boxing or a MMA world champion, Tyron Woodley to get to that level, he had to at least have had a boxing coach for 10, 15 years. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So I don't know. Do I have any merit in what I'm saying, or I just don't know shit about boxing?
Nah, you definitely have merit again, because if you don't know shit, then I don't know shit. And I think we're talking about, guys that you have to find where the advantage or the edge is going to be. And it's becoming a thinner line, even as we talk about a guy that's 48. Maybe he'll be 49 by the time the fight actually happens. Right. So that's the other part. We're not talking about, you know, um, just using names. We're not talking about a younger guy like a Usman who is still in a prime of his career, but he's a lot younger.
Yeah.
And we have to be concerned about his technique. We're talking about, respectfully, Jake Paul's still fighting a 48 or 49-year-old guy.
Yeah.
No matter how experienced he is, no matter how, like, he's still fighting an old man, years away, not months, years away from an AARP card. So
Yeah.
I want to give Jake Paul credit, but I don't want to over exaggerate it because the Rockman fight would have been more telling because at least it's against someone your age. Like it's like Seinfeld, Kramer taking karate with the youth classes. Of course, he whooping everybody ass. You know what I'm saying? So, you can't be a young buck and you out here fighting old men. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, and the
respectfully.
thing is, when you bring up Rockman Jr., I think that's a whole nother discussion, but we're gonna see how he does against Vitor Belfort.
Sure.
And all I'm saying is he better look really good, because you get these people that wanted to, and I mean, you even just made the comparison that, had he fought Rockman Jr., he would have gotten a lot more credit than a fight with Anderson Silva. But I think it goes into if Anderson Silva fought Rockman, who would win? And we'll see something similar like that. Vitor Belfort most certainly is not the boxer that Anderson Silva is, if he's a boxer at all. You talk about beating up an old man. I think, Holyfield might have actually had the AARP card.
Definitely
So,
did. 57
yeah.
years old.
Yeah. So we're talking about Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva was 47, but, 47, 49, close enough. We saw Bernard Hopkins fight till 49, but he was the guy who didn't take that much damage. He fought smart. Anderson Silva has been knocked out a few times. He's taken
Broken leg.
broken leg. He suffered a TKO leg injury against Jared Cannonier a couple years back. He definitely has some miles on him, but at the end of the day, man, he is crafty. He is slick. He has a box rec of 3-1. So, at the end of the day, to answer the question, is Anderson a real boxer? Even though we know him for being one of the greatest UFC champions of all time, if not the greatest UFC champion of all time, especially with the record defenses, we have to say, or at least I say, yes, Anderson Silva now has shed that and is considered a real boxer. Because if you're not a real boxer after beating a former world champion, I don't know what makes you a real boxer.
I agree. I agree.
Absolutely. So, maybe when the fight gets closer, we'll take a deeper look into it and see, how this fight can actually play out. But in the meantime, King Amin, we've touched up on some good subjects. Once again, drop the handle. Where can everybody find you?
Hey man, find me at King Amin of Essex 1 on Instagram for all the news and notes, weekend posts, morning after, and also on YouTube, King Amin of Essex 1 for those championship rounds, rotating co-hosts, but the content is always still the same. Boxing, MMA, wrestling, anything that involves combat, physicality, and the will of a winner to exceed through the championship rounds. That's where you can find me, us, and that's what we doing, y'all.
Absolutely. And let me tell y'all, that is a good show. They bring a lot of good insights in there. So, that being said, I don't know shit about boxing. What do you think about King Amin? If you don't think we know shit about boxing, drop that comment below and let us know. Until the next time, salute.
Salute, brother.
Take care.